I'm Glenn Setchfield with DMI. I'm the VP of Marketing. And if you're not familiar with DMI University, it's a great resource for everybody to get educated on various conceptual topics like Social Security, filling the Social Security gap, LTC, chronic illness, longevity, and then also things like federal student loan debt management strategies. So, today that is exactly what we're going to talk about. And we'll be discussing types of federal student loans, non-income driven repayment plans, income driven repayment plans, forgiveness programs, deferment, forbearance, and default. So this is going to be a really interesting one. And I have to say it's extra special because Jeff Svoboda and Allison Hoyt are both former Division I and Division II NCAA or college athletes. So got to give them props for that. But you know what? I just want to say that if you have any questions today, use the chat function or the Q&A. And with this will be recorded, by the way. Somebody just asked, but so use that, use those functions there at the bottom of your screen, and then at the end of the presentation, we will get back to you with answers to your questions. So to kick things off, I just wanted to hand things over to Jeff, and then we'll go to Allison. But Jeff Svoboda from Nationwide, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Glenn. And just to introduce myself again, Jeff Svoboda, I'm the Business Development Vice President responsible for life sales, and I partner with DMI closely. We help bring both thought leadership as well as life insurance strategies to solutions to customers. And I'm excited because I get to introduce Allison. And Glenn mentioned I did play lacrosse in college, and as I'm reading through Allison's bio, she's got me. She played volleyball and softball, so she was a real overachiever. But Allison Hoyt is with our advanced consulting group, and she joined us in 2018. And so I just want to mention a little bit, read a little excerpt from her bio that I think is so cool. Is she helps position life insurance in the financial services plans of individuals, businesses, and charitable organizations, and has a particular interest in split dollar life insurance, business succession planning, income tax and transfer mitigation strategies, and student loan debt management. That was a mouthful, but what I can tell you from working with Allison over the years is her passion for it is real. She is an educator at heart. She's going to teach you how to look at different strategies. She's open to questions, as Glenn mentioned. Q&A, we'll address those near the end. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Allison Hoyt.
Thank you, Jeff. And yeah, unfortunately, we're too early for the name to cash in on the name, image, and likeness deals all these college athletes are getting now. Just pretty scary. But thank you for that introduction. And Glenn, thanks for having us here. It's really a pleasure to be with you today and to talk about a topic that I am very passionate about, having had to pay down 6 figures plus of student loan debt myself. My name is Allison Hoyt. My day job is advanced life insurance sales at Nationwide. I help everyone and anyone selling nationwide life insurance. I've had the pleasure of working with Jeff Svoboda. We actually were very responsible in bringing a collaboration with Free Will to Nationwide, and Jeff's internal Amy Miller. I've had the pleasure of working with her as well. So you have a strong Nationwide team behind you. Today, we're not going to talk life insurance products, although I'm going to sneak some things in, which I think are to your benefit on where student loans and life insurance intersect. But we're going to spend the time today talking about federal student loan debt management strategies. And we have a healthy group. We're almost at 60, which is great. I'm going to go through this content and be sure to leave at least 10 minutes at the end to address your questions. And I hope you do have questions. To the extent that I don't know the answer to them, I will get your email and follow up with you. So feel free to ask away. Here's our standard disclosure slide. We don't provide tax, legal, or investment advice. the clients always need to get that from their own tax, legal, or investment advisors. So we have a jam-packed schedule today. I'm going to break it down into 3 different parts. And we'll start off talking about some current issues in student loans and student loan debt management, what's going on today with regards to the CARES Act, what federal loan programs are available today, and a little bit about FAFSA and permanent life. And after we do that, how do we get rid of student loans, right? That's what all of these borrowers and these graduates, right? OSU had its graduation, Ohio State University had its graduation last weekend. Really timely topic, so good job, Glenn. You know, borrowers are graduating with their student loan debt. And, you know, the CARES Act is playing with when they have to start repaying that, but generally loans have to be repaid. Stay tuned to the news, obviously, for developments there. But how do we traditionally get rid of student loans? We'll take a look at the forgiveness programs that are available, the repayment plans that are available, and address something called interest rate refinancing. And then finally, to the extent you have prospects or clients or friends or family members that are struggling, or maybe you personally have some student loan debt on the call today, no matter what level this appeals to you at, we'll talk about some tools that can help borrowers that are struggling, because the name of the game when it comes to student loans is avoid default at all costs. And there are a lot of levers we can pull to help ourselves, our friends, our family members, our clients avoid default. So we'll start with the first chunk here with some current issues and the CARES Act. This was a white paper I wrote for Nationwide the day the CARES Act was passed back in 2020. Dear God, that's over 2 years ago now, March 2020. And I've had to keep updating it because the CARES Act relief keeps getting extended. So the title is CARES Act provides relief for many student loan borrowers. And we can get you a copy of this white paper. Now, many of you are familiar what the CARES Act did. The most significant relief is that there's been a 0% interest rate on these student loans since March 2020. And all payments have been suspended essentially during that time. So it's like a pause button was hit in March of 2020, and it should be resuming in September 1st of this year. That was the latest, I believe, by President Biden's executive order. So the bill will come due September 1st of this year. This white paper has the old restart date, May 1st, on it. We've since updated it to September 1st. Now, notice in my title, I didn't put that the CARES Act provides relief for all student loan borrowers, because that is not the case. CARES Act relief only applies to certain federally held, and that needs to be a air quotes terms, federally held student loans, right? So off the bat, if you have a private loan, it doesn't apply to you, CARES Act relief. Now, some private lenders may be doing their own thing because of the pandemic, but private loans aren't eligible for CARES Act relief. State level loans, right? These are only going to talk about federal loans, and the CARES Act only applies to federally held federal loans. So if you have a loan from, I know Connecticut has a robust state student loan program, CARES Act doesn't apply to those loans. If you got any institutional loans, CARES Act doesn't apply. So where does CARES Act apply? 3 different types of federally held student loans. All direct loans get the CARES Act relief. Some FFEL loans, federal family education loans, some of them get relief, only those that are on the balance sheet of the federal government, not that are on the balance sheet of private lenders. It would be pretty easy to determine by calling your loan servicer to determine which one you had. You should probably already know that. And then some federal Perkins loans programs. loans, loans that were on the government's balance sheet, on the federal government balance sheet, not on the balance sheet of the private institution. So, you know, the bill will come due sooner rather than later. And, you know, hopefully these borrowers are prepared for that. I guess there's always a chance that it gets accepted again. So we'll have to stay tuned. Now, if those federal student loan programs that I just mentioned are new to you, if you've never heard of the Direct Loan Program or the FFEL loan program or the Perkins, let's take a step back and I'll kind of tell you how we got here to this point in time. And the trivia question I give is what historical event is largely responsible for giving rise to the federal student loan program in the United States? For you history buffs, the date is October 4th, 1957. So this historical event, October 4th, 1957, is credited with starting it all, a federalized student loan program. And that would be Sputnik. October 4th, 1957, a country called the Soviet Union launched a satellite named Sputnik 1 into space, and this scared and shocked the United States. In response, about a year later, the United States enacted the NDEA, the National Defense of Education Act. This was a program providing loans for students to study math, science, and foreign languages. And over time, the National Defense of Education Act loans, they were renamed Perkins loans. They lost all emphasis on math, science, and foreign languages, and they became loans available for low-income students. After the National Defense of Education Act happened, about 10 years later, there was a second federal student loan program that started. This was known as the Guaranteed Student Loan Program back in 1966. And as its name implied, all the federal government did was guarantee the loans made by private institutions. Fast forward, I think in the 90s or later on, the Guaranteed Student Loan Program got renamed the Federal Family Education Loan Program, FFEL. Same premise, the federal government merely guaranteed loans made by private lenders. So that was the second student loan program in the United States. And in 1994, we got the third federal student loan program in the United States, which is the William D. Ford Federal Direct Loan Program. And as its name implies, these are direct loans from the federal government. These loans are made with, whoever taxpayers' money, the federal government's money. They're on the federal balance sheet. So that's the direct loan program. Now, over time, some of these loan programs have gone to the wayside. In 2010, we no longer make or guarantee loans under the FFEL program. Program's gone over 10 years. Similarly, in 2017, the Perkins Loan Program was also cut, which means the only game in town for the last 5 years or so for borrowers has been and is currently the Federal Direct Loan Program. If you come into clients and prospects and friends and family, most likely have direct loans. So we'll spend our time talking about the features of this direct loan program. So what's available under the direct loan program? Well, let's take a look at what's available today to our undergraduate students. They're entitled, well, they're not entitled, but they are eligible for two different types of direct loans. One is an unsubsidized loan, the other is a subsidized loan. And merely by filing the FAFSA, an undergraduate becomes eligible for an unsubsidized loan. The unsubsidized loan is not a means tested benefit. You can make $1 million a year or $100 a year. You filed a FAFSA and you are entitled to an unsubsidized loan, but in pretty small amounts, as you can see, depending on your year in school. A first year student gets up to $5,500, second year $6,500, third year $7,500, with a maximum lifetime of unsubsidized loans of $31,000. You see the current interest rate is 3.73%. That was for the people who are graduating now. I haven't looked at to what the fall interest rates are going to be. I would think they're going to be a little higher. Now, certain undergraduates, when they fill out the FAFSA, will be considered having financial need. And if you are an undergraduate, that according to the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, it is required to get any federal student aid. If according to the FAFSA you have financial need, part of your first year loan will be subsidized, which means that interest will not accrue while you're in school and during your grace period, which is typically 6 months after you graduate. So subsidized loans are preferential. The government subsidizes or pays for the interest while the borrower is in school at least half time, and that 6-month grace period normally after graduation. The way to interpret this, the interaction of subsidized, unsubsidized, you can't get 5,500 of unsubsidized and 3,500 of subsidized in your first year. You can get a maximum loan from the government of up to 5,500 your first year. Up to 3,500 could be subsidized. So if you are eligible for the full 3,500 of subsidized loan your first year, you can only get an additional $2,000 of unsubsidized loans. So these are, I don't know the right word, together they're not, you can't stack them. So that's what's available for undergraduates from the federal government today. How about the parents of undergraduates? What do they get? They can apply for something called a PLUS loan. Again, all that the parent needs to do is fill out the FAFSA. This is not a needs-based loan. This is not a means-tested loan. The PLUS loan, you can make, $1 million or $100, and you're still going to get the same PLUS loan as, I'm going to get the same PLUS loan as Jeff Bezos is going to get. They're not means-tested benefits. The one caveat with a PLUS loan is that the parent cannot have an adverse credit history. There's really nothing official on what that means. I would presume it means something along the lines of low credit scores, a history of judgments, bankruptcies, etc. But I put the asterisk there because there's ways to get a PLUS loan if you still have an adverse credit history. You can get a co-signer or tell the government reasons why that you have a bad credit history, and if they think that they're valid, they might still give it to you anyway. The scary thing with PLUS loans is that the cost, the maximum amount borrowed is the cost of attendance minus other financial aid received. So if your kid wants to go to NYU, and that's about $80,000 a year, and they get the full 5,500 of unsubsidized loans, you can take out an unsubsidized loan of up to $74,500. So the limit is very large, and they should be used, with much thought. And the interest rates are higher than the undergrads. This last academic year, 6.28%. Okay, so the last current thing I wanted to touch upon here is, the interaction of FAFSA and permanent life insurance. And there's a lot of bad information out there on the internet about, should you buy a permanent life insurance policy to help with a financial aid award? And I wrote this article 2 or 3 years ago Basically, the answer is no. It is a very bad recommendation to tell a parent of a sophomore, junior, or senior in high school that they should buy a permanent life insurance policy to make their student loan award better. Very bad. The rule is a red herring, unfortunately. There's an underlying rule that permanent life insurance doesn't count for purposes of the expected family contribution test with FAFSA or on the CSS profile. It's true that it doesn't count, but FAFSA and the CSS profile, they're income tests. They weight income a lot more heavily than they do assets. They're not assets tests. So that's the first point. And secondly, it's a bad recommendation. I'll tell you when the right time to use permanent life insurance for education was. Most of the federal aid and aid available is not means tested. So you're trying to play a game for limited benefits. And unfortunately, FAFSA is just not an asset test, it's an income test. So, and it also cheapens permanent life insurance. The right time to have used a permanent life insurance policy to help plan for future education costs was when that child was very young, you know, a toddler or in elementary school, because you're able to use cash value to either not get a loan and pay for your child's college education, or get a loan and use the cash value to repay the loan you took out. So a much better way to use permanent life insurance to help with education costs, really stays true to the product and what it does well. All right, so that's some general current events, I guess, going on with student loans today. The CARES Act relief, what loans are currently available through the federal government for borrowers. And just wanted to throw in some information about FAFSA because I get this question way too often. There are going to be pretty significant FAFSA changes coming, so stay tuned for that. All right, next chunk of information I'd like to talk about is how do you get rid of student loans? And that's where I like to spend my time. I don't like to tell people what they should and should not borrow to pursue their dreams. But I like helping to come in, you know, when we've got a loan balance and we've got an income, and, you know, how do we most efficiently get rid of these loans? And we'll take a look at the forgiveness programs available, repayment plans, interest rate refinance. Now, the federal government offers two different forgiveness programs. And the first one is not as well known. It's called the Teacher Loan Forgiveness Program, where you can get a portion of your unsubsidized or subsidized, not plus loans, but your unsubsidized or subsidized loans can be forgiven if you work consecutively for 5 years at a low income school or educational agency. And using that link, you can find out if your school or educational agency qualifies as one of these low-income schools for which someone can get teacher loan forgiveness. If you teach math, science at the secondary level, or special education at any level, you can get up to $17,500 of your subsidized or unsubsidized loans forgiven. If you teach anything else, you can get up to $5,000 of your subsidized or unsubsidized loans forgiven. So it's a nice program to have if you are a teacher in a low-income school or educational service agency. The more robust forgiveness program out there is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And now you can't double count the time. So the 5 years that you need for teacher loan forgiveness, you can't also apply that to public service loan forgiveness. So those teachers, some of them might have to choose what's a better program for them to get forgiveness through. Because with public service loan forgiveness, after you work for 10 years, or 120 months, and they don't have to be consecutive, whereas teacher loan forgiveness, they do have to be consecutive. With public service loan forgiveness, you work for 10 years or 120 months, and then whatever is left over at the end of that period of time is forgiven. What's good about program forgiveness is that the amounts forgiven is not taxable income to you. Now, public service loan forgiveness program, you work for a public employer, you work for a public school, you work for a public hospital, you work for the district attorney's office, you work for a nonprofit organization. There is a form that you should fill out every year, the employment certification form, just to make sure that you are working at an employer that qualifies under this program. Unfortunately, the amount of borrowers getting forgiveness is very, very, very low. I forget the statistics, but I think over 90% of applications for forgiveness under public service loan forgiveness are denied. They're not counting right, they don't have the right loans, they don't have the right repayment plans. So if you're going for forgiveness, whether it's teacher or public service, you want to be in something called an income-driven repayment plan. Now, a few years ago, the federal government introduced the temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness opportunity. If the only mistake that borrower made during that 10-year period was that they were in the wrong repayment plan, they could still qualify for forgiveness. So what's sad under this one as well, borrowers continued to get rejected and denied in very high numbers. And I want to say that one was over 75% of applicants were still rejected. So the next thing the government tried is also currently ongoing. It's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Limited Waiver Opportunity. If you had the wrong loans and the wrong repayment plans, you could still qualify for forgiveness. So they just have kept loosening the standards to qualify for forgiveness under the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. The takeaway for me is that if you are working with anyone who thinks they qualify, you really have to dig into these two additional opportunities, because even if they don't qualify under what the regs say is the public service loan forgiveness requirements, they still might qualify under the temporary expanded public service loan forgiveness opportunity, and they may still qualify under the public service loan forgiveness limited waiver opportunity. So those borrowers need some extra hand-holding, unfortunately, because the qualifications were pretty technical and people had trouble figuring out what are the right loans, what are the right repayment plans, did I make 120 qualifying payments, did I work for the right employer? It seems, unfortunately, not many people have been able to take advantage of this program. So outside of forgiveness programs, and again, if you're going into a forgiveness, if you're trying to get forgiveness, you should be in an income-driven repayment plan. If you're not going for forgiveness, if you work for a private employer, the biggest decision that you're going to have to make normally is what repayment plan you should be in. And here's the menu, what I call the menu. And I think it's helpful to think of them in two groups: the non-income driven repayment plans and the income-driven repayment plans. Simply, the difference is a non-income driven repayment plan determines your monthly payment without regard to your income. The income is irrelevant in those calculations, whereas the income-driven repayment plans use your income to determine how much you pay every month. The choice is up to the borrower, whatever makes the most sense. You're not stuck with one repayment plan for the life of your loans. You can pretty much change repayment plans at any time. So a strategy in the first few years after graduation might look different than the middle of the graduation and 10 years out might be different. I don't think many people appreciate that. The most popular repayment plan is the, by number of borrowers in it, is the standard repayment plan. That repayment plan calls for normally the highest monthly payments. And if you don't choose a repayment plan, you default into standard. So I think more thought around what repayment plan should I be in would help borrowers. And to help them make that decision, the link here is to the Student Loan Simulator. And it's a great website sponsored by the federal government where a borrower inputs all of their loan data. I have an unsubsidized loan for $5,000 and the interest rate's 3%. I have a unsubsidized loan for $6,000 and the interest rate is 4%. You put all of your loan information into this website, the simulator, and out pops what your repayment would look like under all the different repayment plans that you're eligible for. So you'll see your monthly payment, your cumulative payment, and your total time in repayment. By using that website, the Student Loan Simulator, I would recommend all borrowers use that to help them figure out what repayment plan makes sense for them. And just want to kind of give you an example of how they work and the features of each. So we'll start with the non-income driven repayment plans. And the example is with a borrower has $50,000 of debt and an income of $65,000. So if this is non-income driven, remember the income number is just irrelevant. You know, it's not factored into how these monthly payments are calculated. We're just really looking at the $50,000 of debt. With standard, you'll have your loan paid off in 10 years, 120 months, with 120 equal monthly payments. So that's a monthly payment of $551 here for this borrower. And the standard will keep your cumulative amount repaid down. The graduated repayment plan will also have your loans paid off in 10 years. This was probably the first attempt at an income-driven repayment plan because payments start out lower than under the standard, and they gradually rise every 2 years. So that is something a borrower likes. The graduated repayment plan is an option. You'll be done in 10 years. Monthly payment starts a little lower, but it ends a little higher. Hopefully you have some better earning potential at that point, and you're more financially settled. Take those payments off. And then there's just two variations on a theme. If you have over, I believe, $27,000 of student loans, you can extend either of the standard or graduated repayment plans, hence their creative names, the extended standard or extended graduated, over a 25-year period. Again, those extended repayment plans are not available to everyone. You have to have over, I believe it's $27,000 of student loan debt. If you use that link I shared on the screen earlier, you know, they have all that programmed into it. So if you're a borrower with $20,000 of student loan debt, those two options are not going to come up for you because you're not eligible. So those are pretty straightforward, I think, the non-income driven repayment plans. Where it gets really confusing, quite honestly, is with the income driven repayment plans. And if you noticed on the menu, there are 4 different ones to choose from with all very similar names: income-based, income contingent, pay as you earn, and revised pay as you earn. I've chosen to highlight here 2 income-driven repayment plans. ICR will normally result in the highest monthly payment for your income-driven repayment plans, and REPAY, revised pay as you earn, typically results in the lowest monthly payment for your income-driven repayment plans. You know, a borrower who's making a good income might like the idea of tying their income, tying their monthly payment to their income. That's where ICR, income contingent repayment, comes in, because that's typically the highest monthly payment with the income-driven repayment plans. Whereas a borrower who is struggling is really trying to reduce that monthly payment to the lowest possible. And that's where revised pay as you earn comes in. It typically results in the lowest monthly payment of the income-driven repayment plan. So now if we take the same borrower with $50,000 of debt, the $65,000 of income is very relevant. Now, with ICR and repay, the first column there says partial financial hardship. The two other income-driven repayment plans, the borrower has to pass some type of threshold that says, I have partial financial hardship in order to select them. Not so with ICR or repay. You don't have to have this preliminary showing of partial financial hardship in order to elect either of these. These two are available for all borrowers, whether you're doing really well or you're doing financially, you're not doing very well financially. So no showing of partial financial hardship is required. Now, when it comes to the monthly payments, ICR says the monthly payment is going to be 20% of the borrower's discretionary income. And repay says the monthly payment is going to be 10% of the borrower's discretionary income. And you'll notice that they both define what discretionary income is differently. ICR says it's the adjusted gross income minus the poverty line. Repay say it's adjusted gross income minus 150% of the poverty line. And they both have different terms or cancellation periods. With ICR, you make your payments, and if there's anything remaining at the end of 25 years, it is canceled, but it is taxable. This is not forgiveness, this is a cancellation, it is taxable. With repay, if all of your loans are undergrad, you have 20 years. And if any of your loans are graduate loans, the term is 25 years. And again, if anything is left over at the end of 20 or 25 years, it is canceled, a taxable income. If you're curious, the poverty line this year for a family size of 1 is $13,590. So 150% of that is $20,385. And you just plug and chug into these formulas, right? If this person's making $65,000 to determine their monthly payment under income contingent, you say, okay, it's 20% of discretionary income. Discretionary income is adjusted gross income minus the poverty line. That's your annual discretionary income. Divide that by 12, and you get your monthly discretionary income. And then you do 20% of that monthly discretionary income. You're looking at an $852 payment, monthly payment under ICR. Repay, the same thing. It's plug and chug with the formula. Discretionary income is AGI minus 150% of the poverty line. That will give you your annual discretionary income. You divide that by 12 to get your monthly discretionary income, and 10% of that is $372. So you can see there's a pretty big discrepancy in the monthly payment with different income-driven repayment plans, with the repay having a very low 372 and ICR a more significant 850. And that's, the simulator will do all these calculations for you. I'm just giving this group a little more insight into how the sausage is made, as they say. And the final thing I'll bring up when it comes to, how do we get rid of student loans? Yes, if you're going for a forgiveness program, you want to make sure you're on the right track. You want to be in the best repayment plan for you at the particular time. And, I get mailings monthly, if not more, from student loan refinancing companies like SoFi, and I don't even have student loans. So there's a mass hard push for students to interest rate refinance their loans, and all that means is they take whatever the 5% loan they have with a government loan, let's say, and they can get a 4% or a 3% interest rate with SoFi. Beware. Okay, proceed with caution. If you refinance a direct loan, you lose all the benefits associated with direct loans. You lose all those repayment plans, you lose all those forgiveness programs. What we haven't talked about yet, you lose deferments and forbearance. So it is a risky decision to take your loans out of the loving embrace of the federal government and then move them into corporate America. For the right borrower, it could be a good decision, but I would advise people don't make this decision based on one decision point, interest rate. There's a lot more things that need to be taken into consideration when you interest rate refinance. I would limit the people, that I recommend interest rate refinancing to those people who are financially responsible and have good job prospects, have steady jobs, and the financial outlook looks good. For those people who have a good financial picture now, interest rate refinancing could make things better. Allows them to trade their higher interest rate for a lower interest rate, lowering their monthly payment and cumulative amount repaid. Obviously, if you're going for a forgiveness program, you don't want to refinance because those lenders typically don't forgive loans. All right, so we've gone through a lot of good information. I see a lot of questions, which is awesome. Can't wait to take them. And let's talk about the last part. What can we do to help borrowers who are struggling paying back their student loans? We don't want to be an ostrich and put our head in the sand, especially when it comes to student loans. And we do want to help borrowers avoid default. So within the direct loan program, there are a lot of levers to pull when borrowers are struggling, and I'll go through them in the order that I think they should be used. The first is the borrower eligible for any type of deferment? And a deferment will stop the requirement of the payment of principal and interest. Now, be careful because interest can still accrue during a deferment, but it will, and then the accrued interest will be capitalized when the deferment ends, but that might be necessary to get the borrower back on his or her feet. But a deferment, you don't have to make your principal or interest payment. Normally they're granted in 12-month intervals, in a year interval. If you can still make the interest payment during a deferment, great. Again, it's going to be capitalized. While you're in school, you're in a deferment. If you take out a Parent Plus loan, the student, your child, while your child's in school, you don't have to pay on your Parent Plus loan. If you're in a graduate fellowship, if you're in the Peace Corps on active duty, if you're post-active duty, you're in a deferment, you don't have to make those principal and interest payments. This is a relatively new one. I think this was passed under President Trump. If you are undergoing cancer treatment, you are in a deferment for as long as that treatment lasts. And the last three I really want to highlight, someone who's fallen on hard times. They're in a rehabilitation training program for drug abuse, for alcohol abuse, for mental illness. They're unemployed, or they're just underemployed. They have economic hardship. Well, they're entitled to a deferment for 12 months for up to 3 years. That's for if they're unemployed or if they're having economic hardship. If they're in that rehabilitation training program, they can get that deferment for as long as they are in a rehabilitation training program. So this is the first line of defense where I would look if someone is struggling, do they qualify for a deferment? And the second line of defense is the forbearance. Now, a forbearance is very similar to a deferment. It's more like touchy-feely, I would say, whereas deferment is normally a 12-month cessation of principal and interest payments. Forbearance can look a little different. You can tell your lender, look, I just need to stop making payments for the next 6 months. I have this big medical bill that I have to pay, and I just can't do my loan payment and medical bill right now. Can I get a forbearance for 6 months? Can I just pay interest for the next few months? So although a forbearance can look exactly like a deferment, where it stops principal and interest payments, you have a lot more leeway in crafting what a forbearance looks like. They're available to medical interns and residents. While you're a teacher going for teacher loan forgiveness, you don't have to make any loan payments. If you're in the AmeriCorps or National Guard duty, you're in a forbearance, you don't have to make payments. If you are in an area that was hit up to with a natural disaster, you have 3 months of forbearance for your loans. If your monthly payment is 20% or more of your total monthly income, so it's another version of economic hardship, you're in a forbearance and don't have to pay. And please take note of the one with the asterisks. This is like huge. The government will grant you a forbearance for any reason it finds acceptable. There's no limitation, there's no like up to 3 years on this. So the first line of defense is deferment. The second line of defense is a forbearance. And if you don't qualify for any of those and your forbearance was not accepted, you will default if you are, I think it's more than 270 days late. So what you should do on the 270th day, I'm being extreme for the example, if you consolidate your loans and you're delinquent and you're struggling, if you consolidated on the 270th day, you would then be current on your brand new consolidation loan. So that's the way I look at consolidation loans. They are to be used only in case of an emergency. Unfortunately, too many graduates and borrowers, they go, oh my God, I have 8 different loans. I can't handle this. I'm going to consolidate them into one loan. You've wasted a huge life preserver for you. What a consolidation loan does is it takes, you're dispersed a loan every semester. You can graduate with 8 loans if you're an undergrad. Consolidation loan can pay off all of those 8 loans in exchange for dispersing a brand new 1 consolidation loan. So instead of making payments on 8 different loans, a borrower is only making payments on 1 loan. It is overused, I think, by a lot of borrowers, and its really amazing purpose, I think, is to be able to save a borrower on the brink of a default. You might not want to wait to the 270th day exactly to consolidate, but pushing 200 plus days, you consolidate, you've just bought this person another 270 days to get their financial footing right, to get their student loan right. And cool thing happens with a consolidation loan, and if you choose the standard or graduated repayment plan, again, just to help those borrowers who are really struggling, if they have over $60,000 of debt and they consolidate, they can stretch repayment out over 30 years. So if you remember when we talked about the standard or graduated repayment plan, normally it's 10 years. But something cool happens in the regs. If you have over $60,000 of student loan debt and you consolidate, you can get an additional 30 years to pay off those loans. So consolidation loans have these unique properties, as you can see. Once you get a consolidation loan, your term in repayment, if you choose either standard or graduated, is dictated by how much student loan debt you have. And that can be a real lifesaver for someone who is struggling and has significant loan debt. They can really stretch out the time to repay. And the final slide here is about default. If I can get to it. Okay. You've done everything to try to help this person, and they're more than 270 days late with a payment. What happens? Well, the full balance is due, right? It results in acceleration, which is kind of counterintuitive. The government's saying, all right, you haven't made a payment in 270 days. Now you owe me everything now. So they have 3 options at that point. They can pay it back in full, which likely won't happen. They can consolidate to get out of default. But again, I would have used consolidation before I defaulted. If you default and then consolidate, that default is not removed from your credit history. The best option in a default would be to rehabilitate. And that's when you've made a good enough effort. You've made 9 payments within 20 days of the due date, and you've made those 9 payments in 10 months. Once you rehabilitate, any treasury offset or wage garnishment would end and the default removed from your credit history. And if you don't want to play nice with the government, It's going to be really embarrassing for you at your employer because your employer is going to have to withhold some of your wages to repay your loans, or your tax refunds or Social Security benefits or federal benefits will be offset. The government will likely get repaid one way or the other. All right, so we went through a lot of good ground today, and Glenn, I'm happy to go through some of the questions.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Allison. Thank you so much. There's a lot to unpack there. And I think, yeah, we do have a number of questions here. So